Thank you both. Can we have the lights up, Brian? We thought we'd do the Q&A on note cards, but you guys are a little shy, so we'll put you on the spot. You can stand up and ask questions. Before we do that, I had a question of my own. You guys met with the high schoolers earlier today and talked about ending stories. And how do you know when it's the right time to end a story? Yiyun, you said you either ended before people were ready or after. And Edward, you talked about knowing how to end a story, having read millions of stories, that it was a sense. My question has to do with not endings, but beginnings. And if you would talk about that spark, and maybe specifically, Yiyun, with regard to this novel, and Edward, a story about the devil crossing the river. Edward, maybe you could go first. Where'd the idea for that story come from?
The idea, it happened so long ago, I really can't remember now. But I try, I guess, for the most arresting beginning that I can. Always knowing, of course, that people have millions of things to do, and that you have to really work hard to make one of those things that they would want to do, read your stories. So I try to, for the best opening that I possibly can, and I go from there.
Yiyun.
Yeah. Well, I think beginning a story is always easier than ending a story or in the middle. So it seems to me you can start anywhere as long as you can go forward. And so I think I have started, but mostly I start a story or a novel with a death. Because we always think of death as the end of the story, and I think death is always the beginning of a story. So this novel, again, as my previous novel, starts with a death, and it's important for me to see a character die and how this leads to the, to the stories of other characters.
Thank you. Anybody out there have a question? Yes.
I was wondering whether you could comment on the characters, the great aunts, although they are relatively minor characters, I found them very haunting. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about how you feel about them.
Right. So I read just a little bit about grand aunts. They are the last generation of Catholic, believers before communism took over China. So right after communism took over China, they lost their church. They lost their whole belief system. So they started their own little church, just two of them. So these are two sisters, and they raised this orphan, Ru. And it's interesting to me that people can make up a religion all by themselves. In the end, they don't have church service. They don't see anybody. They just have this whole belief about a God that nobody understands, and they raise this child for that God, as a sacrifice. And I find that very frightening.
Anybody else? Yes. Edward?
I'm not sure if that's what I do. I guess I just start with people. and go from there. I'd never have any sort of agenda or any, issue that I want to get across. It's always people. I mean, there's certain things, that I believe in. I could never, of course, write a pro-slavery novel. But, you write a novel about people in slavery, and, of course, by the time you finish, you have an idea that I'm kind of anti-slavery. But I didn't set out to write an anti-slavery novel. I set out to write about these people who were owned by one of their own kind.
Yeah, I agree with Edward. I don't have an agenda. It just happens that most of my characters are from China, and China has had a very political and turbulent history. On the other hand, sometimes I think about, people asking these questions about the politics and my characters, and I don't think my characters get up in the morning and look at themselves in the mirror and said, "You are a victim of, a political society," or they get up and say, the whole Chinese history really destroys you. They never say that to themselves. They just, they get up, they think about breakfast and going to work. So in the end, I think I write about these people, but politics is always on their, background. Politics always casts this shadow.
You and I have a question. Do the books come out in Chinese translations in China? Have you given readings in China?
I have given one reading in China, but in English. And and no, my books are not translated into Chinese, and that's a decision I made rather than circumstance. So we get offers from Chinese publishers, and I have always said no because I just don't feel ready yet. I don't think the country is ready. I don't think I am ready either. So it's good just not to step into it at this moment.
Anyone else? Yep.
It seems with both of you that there's a wisdom or a knowingness beyond the mere words in your storytelling that has such depth. And I wonder how, if you articulate how you access that wisdom of the human condition.
Well, so you're making it more complicated than it really is. It's all about once upon a time, this happened, that happened, and then something else happened, and then later on something else happened, the end. And again, we're writing the lines. It's up to the academic knuckleheads to come along and find the stuff in between the lines. We don't think about the stuff in between the lines. You're trying to get the details right. You're trying to make these people real, and that's a hard enough job in itself without thinking about wisdom and stuff for the ages, I don't, but I don't want to, it's just a simple process in many ways for me. It's hard work already without me trying to think about, this will matter to somebody down the line. I don't think about that at all. It's just a matter of trying to get all the details right and make these people real on the page.
Yeah, I think that making the people real on the page is probably what we do, and I think it helps also that I always write about very unwise characters, and they're always stubborn, and their logic is completely wrong, and sometimes they murder other people, and when you don't judge them, I think it's very important not to judge these characters, and when you don't judge the unwise characters, it seems that I sound very wise then.
I have a follow-up, Edward. Your reticence is intriguing to me as somebody who teaches young people and analyzes their work and believes in learning how to write by reading seriously, how do you turn off the reader's curiosity when you sit down to write your own stories? I mean, because your readership is out here and they're asking you questions, how does the magic happen? And you must, in your own sort of reading existence, sometimes wonder that question too.
No, I mean, you know, it's just a matter of wherever it comes from. You know, you see this woman getting on the bus, and you know that within several blocks she's going to go blind, and that's going to be it. And, you know, it never happened, as far as I know. I never heard of anyone getting on a bus and being struck blind. So you're starting from scratch. You know, you have this big piece of clay, and you have to fashion something that is real for the reader. I tell students, you know, and they seem to forget this. The lesson I tell them in the beginning is that you write and try to, because the most important sense, of course, is sight. And so I tell them, you know, you write as if you're watching a movie. I had a student the other day, he wrote about two soldiers, American soldiers in Iraq. And they've been ambushed, and they escape and run into this garage, and they lift the garage door, the metal door, and they go into the garage and shut the door, and so they're waiting until morning when they think they can escape. Now, there's all this dialogue back and forth between these two soldiers, but never once does the author describe the inside of the garage. Now, if you're watching a movie, you know, right away you see what's inside of the garage. So, you know, when you're trying to see this woman on the bus and all the people and everything, you're mindful of the fact that you have to make it seem like she is on a bus, you know, and not just there by herself. It's just hard work, and you don't think about all the stuff that people down the line will think about. It's simple process in many ways, and yet it's not a simple process, you know. You know, there are people out there who want to make it seem as if there's something magical. You know, they get up and they talk about, I was in chapter 2, and my characters just took over. You know, I was amazed where my characters went. I didn't know anything about what they were doing. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hell, if that's the case, you just leave the computer on, go see a movie, and come back, and all the work is done. You know, it's just, you know, it's just simple work. Yeah, it's hard work, yes, but in a certain way, it's simple.
Speaking of movies, though, I gotta ask you, you love movies so much. Did anybody approach about turning Known World into a film?
Yeah, they have, but they haven't gotten any money, and I tell you, you know, it's just, to be honest with you, I don't think they ever will get any money, because they don't really want to see a lot of black people on the screen who have intelligence. You know, they would rather see, you know, a Mandingo kind of thing, and I don't do Mandingo. No.
Forgot the original question. Anybody else before we go home? Yeah. And then.
Yeah, it took me 2 years to figure out the structure of this novel, because, you know, half the novel happened in 1989 and half happened in 2010, and I did try different structure. At first, I had a structure 2-part novel, part 1, 89, part 2, 2010. But with that structure, by the time you are in the middle of the novel, you would know what happened with the poisoning. You know, the second half, you already, you know, you probably would not read the second half. And so, so the next structure I tried was past, present, and past. And so I would, you know, withhold that poisoning, and I'll tell you what happened in the past, and I'll give you the present, and I would just go back and I guess reveal the secret, which is probably the worst possible structure one could ever have. For a novel, I don't know. I think with that, it's very artificial, and it's also manipulating the reader and saying, I'm not going to tell you this. I'm just going to let you wait. But for this novel, I think it's more important is the characters don't know what happened. They have to figure out, and they have to go through this long process. So in the end, I settled down with the past and present past to alternate. In the end, I think the characters and the readers reach the poisoning moment at the same time, and they understand the poisoning at the same moment.
Yep.
Thank you. Returning to your story, like you do at these readings, does that change you, or does that change your thought on the story each time you revisit it in a reading?
No, I try to spend as much time, crafting these things so that they're as good as I can get them at that time in my life. When I was coming up today on the train from D.C., and I forgot to bring proper reading material, so I was forced to read my own stuff. But I read one or two of the stories in this book, and the final one is called Tapestry, and I was quite moved. I laughed at some points. I was touched at a lot of points. And it was almost at times as if I had not read it, but someone else has written it. And that means that I don't have very much to be ashamed of, and there's not much I would do to change it. A period here, period there, that's about it.
That's good. No, I don't ever reread my writing unless I have to do the readings, and I only read the part that I'm going to read because I'm just frightened to see. Sometimes your old books are nightmares.
All right, we'll do one more, and from the student back there. When you're creating your characters, are you thinking about the time period in which the story is set and making a character representative of that time period? I think I know Edward's answer, but I'm going to let him say it. I'm joking.
Representative of the time period. No, it's just because as I told the students earlier, there were, I think, there were 40 books that I was supposed to read on American slavery, just because I wasn't born into slavery. So, but I found the idea of research an horrendous process, so I just went along with all that I had learned in life about that time period. And I didn't once think about the people in the novel as representing 1855 Virginia, because I knew little to nothing about 1855 Virginia. The thing is that, when you don't do the research, the thing is that just to sort of keep it honest, you just stay away from anything that might make someone down the line say, I know 1855 Virginia, and that couldn't have possibly happened. I had originally intended to do research for the county in the novel using Lynchburg, the area around Lynchburg, Virginia. And I was going to go down and visit a friend of mine and stay down there for a couple of weeks and get the lay of the land. And being the lazy sort and a homebody, I never got around to doing that. So I ended up having to create my own county, which is good, because I would have used Lynchburg County or whatever it's called, and invariably you down there in Lynchburg reading, and some southern gentleman got up and said, you know, my family has lived in Lynchburg County for 200 years, and on page 322, you say this, and that could not possibly happen. But when you create your own county, they can't say that.
Well, I certainly don't have that luxury. I didn't create Beijing or or China. But I try to stay, I mean, I don't, it's never on my mind to say, to represent a time period, you know, loyally, you know, with any kind of loyalty, because I like to quote Graham Greene said, disloyalty is the novelist's privilege. Although I don't want to distort things either. So mostly I think what I write about a time comes from memories, either my memory or, you know, my parents' memories, my grandparents' memories, my sister's memories. But people do distort things in their memories, and I think that's okay.
Thank you both. Thank you all for coming. There'll be a book signing in the lounge through the doors at the back. Thanks.